My guest this morning, she is my second guest of 2025, and it is none other than Camille S. Alexander, PhD. Camille S. Alexander earned a PhD in English at the University of Kent with a dissertation focused on Caribbean female migratory literature. Her research interests include Caribbean studies and literature, Black British literature, film, African American literature, and third wave feminism. She is the editor of and contributed to Black British women's writing in the 1970s and beyond, Away from Home, Cambridge Scholars Publishing 2024, and Black Witches and Queer Ghosts, Race, Gender, and Sexual Orientation in Teen Supernatural Serials, Lexington 2024, and guest-edited Caribbean Quarterly, November 2021. Dr. Alexander is currently working on a monograph on the novels of Lakshmi Persaud, Lexington, and is an assistant professor of literature at Tuskegee University. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Camille S. Alexander, PhD. Dr. Alexander, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am well. All is well. Glad to be in touch with you and have the opportunity to speak with you. As I said, you're my second guest of 2025, so welcome. So as I was sharing with you when we were talking a couple of minutes ago, usually my first question is kind of like, where did it all start? Especially because, see, you have your degree in English, and that is a passion of mine in terms of whenever I was a teacher, I taught language arts, I teach public speaking, I do what I do here on the radio. I read, I'm an avid reader. That's why we have the show, The Reading Circle. So the fact that you majored in English, I just want to understand kind of like where did that all start? You know, from the time as a child, were you like an avid reader? Did you like writing? Or is it something that came later in life?
Well, it started with, I was one of those grandmother and grandfather kind of, reclaimed her from her parents. And I grew up in their house in Trinidad, and my grandmother was a storyteller. She spoke English, obviously. She spoke French, and she spoke Trini Creole, so a polyglot, as was my grandfather. Between the two of them, they would just tell these stories. I learned about Lukaru, the Sukuya, the Jumbies. All of these stories were part of my everyday life. Now, my grandmother was a teacher. My grandfather had been a teacher, but eventually worked for the government. And my aunt was a teacher. There were just teachers everywhere.
Okay, we were breaking up. So hang on, go back a minute because we broke up. You said your grandfather was a teacher, and then right after that, we went out for a second.
Oh, okay. So he had been a teacher when he was very young, and then he went to work for the government. He's a civil servant. Still living in the house. Broke up again?
Yeah, the connection is going in and out on us. And interesting.
We have a little storm here. That might be it.
That's probably what it is. For those of you not listening on, she's calling out of Alabama. All right now. And so that I know my mother was in Georgia. She used to live in Georgia prior to her passing away. And I remember when they would get storms down there, we would run into the same issue. It's not snow by any chance, is it?
No, it sounds like rain.
Oh, okay. Because we're projected to get snow tomorrow. And so
who knows?
So your grandfather was a teacher and he went into government, and
my aunt was a teacher. She lived in the house. So I had teachers all around me. Except I don't like being around sick people because I'm a germaphobe. So there's that. But yeah, I just have had storytellers around me my entire childhood, and I was slow to read too. And once I started reading, I became a voracious reader.
So that was even as a child, you became the voracious reader. And see that I was the same way, and that's why I'm always, when I connect with somebody, another reader, I'm like, yes, because when I'm not doing radio, I am a principal, and in trying to do my best to encourage my students to read as much as they can, and in many instances, it is a hard sell. Because we are up against we're up against social media, we're up against all these video games, we're up against so many other things that take away from somebody just sitting there being quiet and getting absorbed and engrossed in a book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how can a book compete with Call of Duty?
Yeah.
It can. It can.
Right. You know what? Depending on, because if it was a child like me and you, now see, I don't know how to react because I'm not really big into video games now. I will play some, but I don't know how to react if I had that other many choices. But I think I probably would have been the same way because I just love words. I'm fascinated with words. I love stories. And interesting, you were talking about the storytelling because from an African perspective, from in our history and our ancestors, that's in our DNA for most part, in terms of that's how Africans in Africa, and still do to a degree, that's how they communicated. The storytelling and so forth and so on. So I'm not surprised that in Trinidad, it was the same thing.
Yes, we very much had a strong African cultural base.
Right.
Perhaps it's kind of like my feminist back in the second wave. I just didn't know what that was, you know?
Right. So, all right. So now as you went through, because you're an avid reader and you're going through school, did you major in English in high school?
No. We didn't have that. I chose school in Houston. And we just had a strong academic program overall.
Right. Okay.
We were supposed to be, back then, they wanted you to become the doctor, the lawyer, but they also had this thing in their. Does that make sense? So we kind of had a broad education in everything. There was no special focus on any one discipline. It was everything all the time. And we were very fortunate because the Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word, who they all had bachelor's degrees. Many of them had master's degrees, and a handful of them had PhDs. So we really got to see what academic excellence for women could look like.
And that is great because, again, academic excellence across the board. And again, in some respects, because I don't want to broad brush it, but in some respects, it can be a hard sell. And again, I work in an urban area, so I'm trying to help children and families connect the dots between academic excellence and becoming successful. That without your academics, you may still live, you still may be alive, you may survive. However, without some academics, it's going to be a very tough road for you. And I'm always amazed that, as we're constantly trying to preach this message and connect the dots between, because a lot of times you get a lot of pushback. Like, I don't understand why I need to learn this. I don't understand why I need to do this. I don't understand why I have to come to school. I don't understand. And interestingly enough, when I have folks come to my area from other countries and come to the schools, they excel. I mean, they surpass a lot of our students who've been here their entire lives. Because this seems to be from folks who come from different places. There's a totally different perspective and outlook concerning education. And you kind of hit on that with your response just now. Uh-oh, we went dead again.
Muslim Caribbean, and I'm speaking from that. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
You can hear me. Okay, so in the Anglophone Caribbean, which all of these are British colonies, education was something very precious. it was a gem. It wasn't something you threw away. And to come to America, and yet what's the literacy rate in this country? Is it like 75, 80%? That's absolutely nothing to be proud of.
Right.
In the Anglophone Caribbean, it's 99.99%. And I assure you, every prime minister is disgusted that it's not 100.
Well, I was in a principals meeting. I was in a principals meeting yesterday, and we were going over proficiency rates, like within our particular state. And the proficiency rates were dismal. Matter of fact, I guess your number of 80%, probably maybe is nationwide, but like in my district or either statewide, I mean, numbers were nowhere close and to the 80. So it's like and because again, for those of us who do migrate or we do matriculate through the education system, I mean, because everywhere, people will say, all right, you got the whole thing of, go to school, go to college, get a job. And in some instances, it may or may not work that way in terms of, okay, you have folk who went to school, got the degrees, and still can't find a job. However, they are still better off than someone who didn't get any education at all.
Well, the alternative for that is going through your education, doing all of the right things, and then getting a job, but not really being able to support yourself.
Correct.
There are a lot of PhDs who are looking at working in retail or restaurants. So I also think that's kind of a disappointing commentary on life in the U.S. in the 21st century. That shouldn't be.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. So in terms of your choice of dissertation, how did you go? Because Caribbean female migratory literature. Mm-hmm. How did you come to that interest in study and so forth and so on?
So, the public schools that I went to in Texas did not have Caribbean studies programs. So I would attach myself or teach me. And I had a group of, believe it or not, white male professors around me, both in my English degree and in my psychology degree, who were just really encouraging and supportive. I cannot say that I had women or Black women, no white men. And because of their support, I was able to write a really good undergraduate thesis on, my advisor picked the topic. It was the cycle. And then when I got to grad school, my master's degree, again, another white male professor kind of picked me up.
We broke up again. We're going in and out. It's like you'll be in the thought and then it blanks out. So I'm not hearing you.
An adjunct at first, and then I did instructor positions. I ended up in Doha, Qatar, working at a community college that had an agreement with an American community college, and I was there for 4 years. And while I was there, I had to figure out something to do with my time, and I started, I kept writing articles. I'd been writing articles and getting published. It wasn't that, but I wanted a PhD. I felt like if I get this, then I'm going to prove that I know what I'm talking about, but also I'm going to kind of secure my career. And I was just really lucky. My dissertation advisor was none other than Nobel laureate Abdul Razak Gurna. He was at Kent. And in the British, so the whole reason I did the British system was because my older brother, he kind of shaded me a little bit. He says, "Oh, you have those American degrees." And he said it like I had a communicable illness. So he says, "You need a good Commonwealth degree, like, who do you think you are ruining the family pride with these American degrees?" So that's kind of why I chose the British route. And the research program was such that I didn't have to quit my job. I had to go to England. I did spend quite a bit of time in England, but I could still keep my job and work on my dissertation. And it was very difficult to do. But I finished it in less than 3 years because, again, I'm an immigrant. You can't fail and you can't waste time.
Correct. That's
time waste.
That's absolutely right. So, Caribbean female migratory literature. Just give a synopsis of kind of like, what is that about?
So basically, Caribbean women who are writing away from home, which is the title of the first book I edited, Away from Home. So these are writers like the late, great Una Marston from Jamaica, the woman who started calling the West Indies in the 1930s, which then became BBC Caribbean Voices in the 40s, 50s, 60s, up until the 70s. I was alive still listening to Caribbean Voices, but nobody knew her name. Or you've heard of the famous Notting Hill Carnival.
Correct.
The lady who started that, what was her name? Cumberbatch. Her maiden name was Cumberbatch. I know that because my family knows the Cumberbatches. In any case, Claudia Cumberbatch Jones. She had been a Trinidadian immigrant, first came to America, then was deported, eventually went to England, where she started the Notting Hill Carnival. So we have all of these women telling their stories of being migrants in other lands, mostly in the quote-unquote English motherland. And I found it fascinating. I also thought they were kind of not telling the truth or they were exaggerating until I got to England. And then I realized every word was wrong. It was true. It's unbearably cold. It's unbearably unfriendly. It's really racist. It's so in my dissertation, I just kind of talked about how we use backchat to kind of tell our stories. Here in the U.S., they say backtalk. We say backchat. So.
Wow. All right, listening audience, I hope you've been with me since 6, but certainly since 7. My guest this morning is Camille S. Alexander, PhD, and we're talking about her works. So we have here, you're the editor and contributor to Black British Women's Writings in the 70s and Beyond, Away from Home, Cambridge College Publisher. Now, the next one is Black Witches and Queer Ghosts. Talk a little bit about that. How did we get there, and what's that all about?
Well, I love like supernatural TV shows. I suspect it's because of my Trinidadian history with our supernatural characters, and I love watching. I love watching the Vampire Diaries.
Okay.
I was living at the time in Al Ain, which is in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, and I came home from a club late one night, and I turned on the TV because I couldn't sleep, and I was kind of watching Vampire Diaries on Netflix, and I thought, man, they really treat that Black female character, Bonnie, poorly. And Bonnie's played by the lovely and talented actress and singer, Kat Graham. So then I kept binge watching, and next thing you know, I was writing. So that article, by this time it's COVID, the article, I put it up for a presentation at a conference, and this fabulous editor from Lexington, she saw it, and she emailed me, just cold emailed me, and said, "Hey, do you want to edit a book?" And I thought to myself, I don't really know how to do that, but I didn't say that. I just said, okay, great.
Right.
So I started, did this new Penn CF. I did my proposal. I already have the article written. And then I did UPenn CFP. I think they approved that book in a week or two. And things just kind of went from there. So, yeah, that was that. And I really wanted to focus on race and gender, but I also realized that sexual orientation is a very critical topic, particularly for people of color.
Right.
So that's where that came from. And sometimes in some of the articles that I felt like it didn't really come through, it just dealt with sexual orientation and teen supernatural serials. But I had to kind of accept that and just focus on getting the message out there that these TV shows that these teens are watching, they really influence them. And I know we have witches and we have vampires and some stuff. Those characters can be cautionary tales, just like folk tales and fairy tales were hundreds of years ago. So we have to use the tools that we have available to us today to reach our young people. And the only way that we can do that is by making sure that the characters who are depicted on these shows are representative of all of the people of the audience themselves. You can't have an all-white cast.
Correct. Absolutely right. So I'm moving through your bio, and so you're currently working on your monograph on the novels of Lakshmi Persaud.
Yes.
How is that going? And I mean, are you close, or are you just starting, or where are we with that?
I just finished a chapter, started another chapter. It's actually going really well, but I will say this. Our Indo-Caribbean women especially, their voices are being heard, but not enough. And my grandmother, we didn't talk about this in those days. We used to tell lies because, it was a disgrace to be black, both black and Indian. She was both black. Oh, and northern weather is getting to you.
Yeah, this past week, I've had a whole lot of what they call phlegm, and so it's been coming back up, and so I'm glad it's almost out.
This is why you should be down in Alabama. You'd be perfectly healthy.
I know that's right.
Down here in Tuskegee,
and that's where I'm going to. I'm glad you brought it, because that's where I'm going to go next in a couple of minutes, is about the experience of being in Tuskegee. Because I am an AV geek. I mean, when I tell you I love aircraft and airplanes and flying, so you are down there with the Tuskegee Airmen. That whole thing, I know their history. So I was getting that you went where I'm going to go next. But go ahead and tell me a little bit more about the Lakshmi Persaud, where you are with that. And then I wanted to talk. I saw something about you doing something about Antoinette Bonnie Candia Bailey.
Yes.
And so yeah.
So we'll get there. We're going to get there. So the Lakshmi Persaud book, I'm very annoyed that Indo-Caribbean women have remained underrepresented in the research to this day. And it's not for the lack of trying. I have a lovely colleague in New York named Anita Bakish, and she's doing a lot of amazing work. There's Linda Mesa, all of these fabulous women contributing, but still it's not enough. We still need more. So I am hoping to make a tiny contribution to this field of research. And of course, we lost Lakshmi Persaud recently, so I'm very interested in making sure that people remember her and honor her and her work. And as the child or the grandchild of a mixed race woman, a black woman who was also, she's Creole and she was also Indian, I'm very fascinated by these narratives because, to be honest, she never talked about the fact that she was Indian. I did not know until the day of her funeral. After the funeral, I found out that her father had been Indian. She never talked about it, ever.
Wow.
So there's a lot of shame, and I suppose because she was Douglas, just and not just Zogla, but her mother's own history, and then what happened when her father died during the flu epidemic. It was just a whole big mess. So I'm hoping at some point I get to tell her story, and I'm actually working on a novel about that. So I'm making sure the ancestors are honored. It's just taken me a while to get there.
Correct.
I'm one person with two hands.
I know that's right. But you know what? Every little bit helps because, like you said, it's just not a lot out there. And we have to continuously tell our story.
Absolutely.
We continuously tell our story. I mean, that's just for those of us who have studied and are learning. And so we have to do it. There's no question about it. We have to do it.
Yes.
So like I said, I saw something you were doing concerning Antoinette Bonnie Candia Bailey. And for those of you who don't know or don't remember, she was the vice president of student affairs at Lincoln University. And she actually committed suicide back on January 8th of last year. The tragedy brought attention to the difficulties and the obstacles that many black women report experiencing in higher education. So tell a little bit about what are you doing with that, or what are your thoughts, your goals, what do you want to come out of that?
So, first of all, let me shout out to my good sister, Dr. Aya Sakai of Universal Right Publications. I've known Dr. Sakai since before she was Dr. Sakai.
Same here. She's one of my favorite people in the world. We've known each other over 20 years now. So yeah, go on, continue.
Dr. Sakai is like a little tornado, which is saying a lot because I live in the middle of tornado territory. She is an academic, black intellectual tornado, and she has been telling me for years, and she'll call me up, "Sis, what you doing?" I'm like, "Girl, you know what I'm doing. I'm writing. When you going to write something for me?" So she badgered me for years. And over the fall semester, I had this article that just been sitting for a while, and I said, "Let me do something with it." And I wrote about, we call her Kamala Harris in the Caribbean. She's Kamala to us, so please excuse me.
Right.
So VP Harris, I wrote about her and I use hip hop because I am definitely a girl of the hip hop generation. So I use Queen Latifah's Ladies First. So later on in the semester last fall, I started going through some issues at work, and they weren't new. And I kind of noticed a pattern. I sit in my office and I write and I do research and I mentor my students, period. That's what I do. If you want me to serve on a committee, I will serve on that committee. In fact, right now, I can't even tell you how many committees I'm on because whenever anybody asks, I say yes. If I'm asked to teach overloads, I might be tired. I might have other obligations. I do it. I have literally been the faculty advisor for, of all things, the STEP Club. I did not pledge anything. I don't step. I took ballet. But I showed up at night. But all of these things are not enough. And I noticed, like, we don't support each other as Black female professors at all. We don't. We will either ignore each other or tear each other down. And there has to be a middle ground somewhere between that. And actually, Dr. Candia Bailey her story was not the one I wanted to tell. There was another female professor, Black female professor, who had committed suicide like 3 or 4 years ago, and I cannot find any record of her anymore.
Wow.
I can't even remember her name. And I literally was Googling looking for her story because at the time she had health issues. She really needed this job. They were, giving her a hard time. They were going to get rid of her. She committed suicide. And with Dr. Candia Bailey actually being terminated by a man who is so unqualified to do his job, it's disrespectful. And to be a white male president of an HBCU, please excuse me because I'm Caribbean, so maybe I don't understand, but word HBCUs founded because the PWIs didn't want black students?
That's correct.
So why are we as black people wholeheartedly welcoming these folks into our spaces when we are never welcome in theirs? And what's more, they're getting paid more than we are, and getting more honors than we are, and getting promotions faster than we are at the HBCUs. This man got all the way to the presidency, and he started off as a basketball coach. To the president of a university.
That is correct. And see, those are the issues that we're constantly confronted with, even though we're now in 2025. Those issues are still there. If anything, they're probably going to be exacerbated.
Yes. And I don't want to say that it has to do with who is in the White House. The president of the United States at the time has very little to do with Black America. And the reason I say that is because Black Americans thrive or not, regardless of the administration.
That's correct. I agree with you there, that we've always made it regardless.
So I don't understand what that has to do with anything. But I will say that with all of these survival instincts, and I'm looking at this as both an insider, because I am Black.
Correct.
I'm always going to be Black.
Correct.
But I'm an immigrant. And I'm coming from a place where not everybody looks like me. Trinidad is a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial society. And we've all done a good job of intermarrying and such over the centuries. So we all kind of look a little different. But I'm coming from that environment. And yes, we have our issues. And I'm coming to this environment where I'm looking at Black people who supposedly all look alike and can't seem to support each other.
Correct.
And I think what happened to Dr. Candia Bailey, and I'm going to call her Dr. Bonnie, and I'm saying that because I feel like she's my sister who died for no reason.
Agreed.
Dr. Bonnie's death was 1,000% avoidable. And the university has showed its hand at being an institution that supports misogynoir by allowing this white, uneducated, unqualified man to bully this talented Black woman. And I am saying that because I actually read Dr. Bonnie's bio. And I read President Mosley's bio. And I assure you, basketball coach to college president versus a woman who had been in academic administration for the majority of her career and a different institution. A woman who left her previous institution so she could go home, go back to the school where she got her bachelor's degree, only to end up dead 8 months later. So, and I don't see anything changing. And I don't see people speaking out. If anything, I see people bending their necks. And quite frankly, I still have a job as of today. Who knows? Tuesday's another day. And I've just done this interview. I don't know. But I've seen bullying. I've experienced it. And it's not just coming from white colleagues. It's coming from Black colleagues as well.
No,
and it is widespread. Yeah.
No, that is interesting, and it's sad. And I mean, because we witnessed for the most part the same thing with the former president of Harvard, with Claudine Gay. Exactly,
Claudine Gay, who I mentioned in the article, that is again available on Universal Right Publications for Researcher. That's Universal Right Publications for Researcher. Please, everybody, check out the Researcher. It's amazing. I mentioned Dr. Gay, President Gay, in this op-ed because I could not understand why this woman was run out of Harvard from a typo. Now, when I wrote my dissertation, I know I made mistakes. I know I did. There's no way. I wrote 350 pages. You know, I had to cut that thing down to a little bit over 300 to pass muster because the rule was 300 hard lines.
Correct.
So I know when I was cutting and chopping stuff up, I made tons of mistakes. So how could Dr. Gay not have? All of us did.
No, that's correct, because I'm in the process of writing mine now, and I know exactly what you mean. I'm in the middle of writing mine. So I agree with you. There is no way that you're gonna find any dissertation perfect.
You are going to make mistakes.
Correct.
Editing, formatting, you're going to forget your quotation marks. You're going to put the quotation marks and forget to put the citation, or you're going to put the citation and forget the quotation marks. It happens. But this was, again, that vitriolic attack on intellectual Black women. Now, since Black women comprise the lion's share of PhDs awarded in the United States, we should comprise the lion's share of academic positions, yet we don't.
Correct.
And the chances of getting a promotion and or tenure are slim. So my writing partner, who's at CUNY, he is white, obviously male, and Jewish. And he and I always have a good laugh because when people look at us together, they assume that I'm the one doing all the African-American literature heavy lifting, when the fact of the matter is it's him. African-American literature is not my initial field. It's a secondary field. And we had a discussion. His name is James. James and I had a discussion the other day, and he's like, OMG, I want to go and take a sabbatical. And I almost started crying. I said, James, I'm happy if I don't get terminated every day.
Wow.
I'm literally holding on to my seat. And I'm so proud of him because, we came up together in academia. We've been writing partners now for almost 10 years. We've known each other. We've been working together. We have a great relationship, and he's a really good friend. But I watched him get his promotion, get his tenure, and he's not any better than me. He's not any worse than me either. We're about the same as far as accomplishments. And I'm like, why can't I get anything? Why am I clutching my seat? And he's like, oh, my God, I need a sabbatical. The flip side is, if I say that I can't do something because I'm just overworked, I'm met with immediate aggression. It's like, how dare you say that you are too busy to do these 900 other things I need you to do?
Correct. And yet, at the same time, he's saying I need a sabbatical.
Well, he deserves a sabbatical. I'm saying our careers are not any different.
That's my point.
Is,
so, but the point is, if you were now to have, for the most part, listen, I need to do the same things over, the response would be different.
Yeah. Oh, I would never get a sabbatical.
That's my point. That's where I'm going.
Yeah. Holding on to my job every day is a miracle. Yeah. It is. Wow.
I'm sitting here as you say that, I'm like astounded. And at the same time, I'm not, basically, because like what we just talked about with Dr. Bailey and Dr. Gay. That's it. Absolutely. And then you go on to say, no, it's not just racism or white folks. It's us too.
Yeah. Black people have this. Well, and also I think it might be the immigrant thing as well. African Americans and Afro-Caribbeans don't get along. We don't. I don't know why that is, but I've seen it repeatedly over the years. And that's really sad because we're not the same. I don't want to make that statement because it's completely untrue. We are not the same. Our experiences, our cultural codes are completely different.
Correct.
And I want to respect all of those. But I also think that we have a common enemy. And throwing all of your hate towards Afro-Caribbeans or African-Americans is not going to help us deal with the common enemy. And the common enemy is systemic racism.
Correct. There you go. Bingo. You get the Cupid doll on that. That's exactly what the common enemy is systemic racism. That's it right there.
Yeah, you just said Cupid doll. You just lost everybody under 30. They don't know about that.
I said that in my school one time, and they said the same thing. And that's kind of like a running joke at my school, with depending on what age category you're in. But you're absolutely right. I'll have to explain the Cupid doll at another time. But in any event, but you bingo, you hit it. You put the hammer on the head of the nail. And while it may be there's a commonality in origin as well. Now, I mean, the boat
absolutely.
just stopped along the way. It stopped on all these various, but the origin still goes back to Africa. So I don't quite understand. Okay, yeah, do we have differences? Yeah. Are we different? Yeah. Different cultures? Yes. But do we have a common origin? Yes, we do. And like you said, we have a common enemy.
And we also have a common history of colonization by European powers.
Correct.
We have a common history of chattel slavery. But again, it's like Haitian voodoo versus New Orleans voodoo. Sound the same, but not really.
Right.
But we still need to respect each other. And I'm also a child of the Black Power movement and the Black Arts movement. In fact, my father was a part of a revolution, but I won't tell that story now because he's still alive and, jail time's a thing.
Right.
But,
right.
We have all of these common narratives, and yet we also have a common distrust of each other. And as a Caribbean, I know coming to America, my mother's thing was, no, we mix, but we don't mix up. We don't get too comfortable around these foreigners. We are immigrants, And I think that's kind of played out. That is the narrative that's played out over the decades, much to all of our detriment. So I definitely think the difference thing is kind of triggering. I'm not like other people, but nobody is, right?
Wow.
None of us is
right.
Exactly the same.
So now, how does that play into now being down in Alabama, and you're at an HBCU and Tuskegee? Like I said, I love Tuskegee from the Tuskegee Airmen, and the fact in Alabama historically, we're talking systemic racism. We're talking that area of the South down into Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. I mean, all those southern states down there. I mean, that was the areas where we were talking about Martin Luther King earlier about his birthday being on the 15th. But that was like some of the areas that it was hard fought.
So Tuskegee is one of those civil rights areas. Tuskegee is also suffering. My personal observation is that Tuskegee and Selma are both being punished for their participation in Black liberation.
Wow.
And I think this has been a decades-long thing coming, but it's not entirely due to the influence of outsiders. Some of the insiders have contributed to what's going on around here as well. Now, I will be honest, I live here in Tuskegee. I own a house here in Tuskegee. I've said that Tuskegee University would be the last place I ever teach. I said that the city of Tuskegee, and I actually live in the Institute part of the city. Let me shout out for a moment to Councilwoman Norma Jackson, District 1. Just texted her yesterday. So I'm in the original part of the city, the Institute, adjacent to the university.
Okay.
There is a lack of sisterhood and brotherhood between the town and the university. And there are a multiplicity of reasons for that have a long historical basis. But we are into another century, and we cannot let the past prevent us from getting to the future.
Correct.
But that seems to be what's happening. But when I came to this school, I made a commitment not only to this HBCU that, quite frankly, doesn't pay as well as the PWIs.
Right.
I turned down a lot of jobs at a lot of PWIs to come down here. And when I got here, I was actually supposed to live in Montgomery because my best friend wanted me to live in Montgomery. If he's a Montgomery boy, his parents are in Montgomery, like, you should be better off in Montgomery. Until I drove for the first time into Tuskegee city limits. You got to drive through Franklin to get to Tuskegee. And I felt at peace. Something just touched my soul, and I said, I need to be here. And I kept looking and looking, and the house I live in now was actually listed as a rental at the time, and I went to rent it, and then the owner said, no, I'm going to sell it. Then a few months later, she came back and told me, hey, do you know somebody who's interested? And I was like, well, me. And in the meantime, and in between time, I had rented a house here in Tuskegee, and funny thing, the owner had given me a year lease, and then she backtracked and said, I'm only going to give you a 6-month lease. And I was upset about it at the time, but lo and behold, here comes this house that I really wanted, and now I get to own it. So I committed to this community. I don't miss a city council meeting. When Councilwoman Jackson needs something done in District 1, I help her out in any way that I can. I ride hard for the city of Tuskegee and for Tuskegee University. In response, the city of Tuskegee rides hard for me. I will say that. But I don't feel that same love on that campus. Now, I do from many of my students. My office is kind of a hangout spot. It's to the point now where if I'm tired and I want to go home,
right,
I just leave them in there. And I say, when y'all leave, lock up. I got to go. I'm so tired. And I just leave and go about my business. And the next day I come and my door's locked and everything's handled. But as far as respecting what I do, I don't get that. What I get is those little passive-aggressive messages. Thank you for all that you do. No, you're not.
Wow.
You don't know what I do.
Wow.
You don't know what I do. And you don't care. Which is why when I wrote the article, which is, again, on Universal Right Publications, The Researcher, it's titled, What's a Girl to Do? Honoring Dr. Candia Bailey and the Struggles of Academia.
Right.
And the article title changed a little bit. I see Dr. Aya's hands on that one, but that's okay. I used the song by Ray Khalil, and the song is called Is It Worth It? It just came out in August 2024, and I want to thank Sister Ray Khalil for doing this song because it really helps me analyze being a Black female academic. What does that mean? Was it worth my time and my emotional and my financial investments in going this far in academia, only to end up back where we say in Trinidad into a back alley?
Now, on that point, from the standpoint of was it worth it, in terms of the females coming behind you, do you see it from that standpoint of they need to have a role model or someone they can look up to or see it being done?
So it's not being done. It's being survived. If I'm worried about my very survival every day, how can I lift as I climb? And it's not that I don't mentor my students. I absolutely do. And in fact, the student who I mentioned in this article, who I opened the article about, her name is Siobhan. And about a year ago, she came to me and said she wanted to become a literature professor. I said, no, you don't.
Wow. I'd say, no, you don't.
Oh, no, it was much more, shall we say, colloquial than that.
Right. Yeah, message received.
And I have discouraged her from that ever since. I said, you are not doing this. I said, you will not. You can go to law school. You can do anything except this.
Wow.
And it's not that I detest academia. I detest how academia treats Black women.
Correct.
This Black woman.
You're right. There's a distinction. Absolutely. There's a distinction. And I'm glad you said that.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want her. And I told her, I said, I'm going to quote Jay-Z for a moment. Again, my hip-hop background. I did this so you don't have to. I'm taking these hits because I don't want to see you take them. This is my burden to carry. You let me carry it. You go carry something else. Now, the outcome of this, but it has already happened. Even at the HBCUs, the majority of the faculty is not Black anyway.
Wow. You just keep hearing me say "wow" as you're sharing. That's something.
I'm saying things that you don't expect, right?
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right. That's not expected. Matter of fact, that's not the perception, and that's not what the average person would think.
Well, the perception is inaccurate. Recently, a picture was taken of the department that I am in, and only 5 of us are Black. 5 full-time Black faculty. Really?
At Tuskegee?
Yes.
Wow. Again, wow. Because
yes, most of our. I mean, now we do have a lot of we have a lot of Africans, and as you know, all Africans are not sub-Saharan.
Correct.
So we have the Egyptians, we have the men, we have from all over the MENA, we have Africans, we have Asians, we have people of color. And back in the day, these professors, they found a home at the HBCUs. And I think that was a great idea. And I think that is something that should not stop. However, I also feel like we need to be cultivating Black academics, but we're not cultivating Black academics. And when students walk into a classroom and the person in front of the classroom does not look like them and has a different perspective from them and does not care to really get to know them or treats them like a doll or a prop or something, it's a problematic situation.
No, I'm listening to you, and what's going through my mind is, wow, that old cliche of the more things change, the more they stay the same. Because I remember when I was going through grad school, and in many instances, if not most instances, I would be the only African-American in the class. And I know exactly how, and I always sat front and center. I made sure that whenever I came to that class, I sat front and center in front of the professor. And I did that intentionally and on purpose. But I do know how my response that I would give would be received versus my classmate right next to me would give the exact same answer. And the reception would be a totally different reception simply because he was of a different persuasion. I was like, but I'm sitting there looking like, but I just gave you that same answer. And it was kind of like, okay, yeah. Now he or she gives it and it's, oh, did you hear that? Yes, that's it. Oh, so it's interesting how and I was in grad school some years ago in terms of the master's programs, but it's interesting to hear you say that. And in particularly on HBCU.
Oh, but then again, Dr. Candia Bailey.
True.
Explain to me how the basketball coach gets to become the president.
True.
So there was nobody else around who was qualified to do this job. So I think that we need to take not only the lesson of just how frustrating it can be to be Black and female in academia, but also how these institutions, and I know you're of a certain age because I think we're around the same age group. You remember the TV show The Paper Chase, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I was watching, like an idiot, I was watching The Paper Chase, and I thought, wow, I want to be that. That dude was old and white and male. And no matter what I do, Black don't crack, I'm never going to look like that.
Right.
I'm never going to have that ancient gravitas look to me.
Uh-huh.
So,
that's right.
Okay. That's okay. But I'm finding that it is impossible for me to tell my students to pick up the baton from me because I'm literally sending them into the lion's den. I love them too much for that.
That's deep.
Now, if I don't like you,
right.
Yeah, be a professor. Shoot, let me help you. Let me write you that. Girl, you want to get that PhD. But if I love you, I can't let you hurt like I'm hurting.
Mm.
And I love them. I have turned them into everything but professors. I got 2 pilots.
All right. I told you I'm an AV geek.
You know, I told them, I said, anytime y'all want to practice, I'll come up with you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I am literally cultivating the next generation of red tails.
All right now.
Anything but a professor. I sent one off to do, I think he's doing journalism now. Another one became a poet, a published poet, been published 3 times. Shout out to Nico White. So, yeah, I'm not really trying to get my students to do what I do. And quite frankly, what's the point? If they're not going to get hired anyway.
And they're going to be treated the way that, you know, as you're sharing of how, you know, the treatment is. That's amazing because, again, as you're, and again, I know of my academic career, I've been in school a lot of years and still in there.
Same.
I sit there and I'm looking at the program that I'm in now, and I'm seeing and I know my black female professor that's in my program, and I'll bet you if you talk to her, you all would have very similar conversations. I'll bet you if you two had a conversation, it would be very similar.
And you have to keep your head down.
Yes.
You especially have to keep your head down. And even if you do keep your head down, the minute people find out that you've done something, anything, that jealousy hits, that venom, and the next thing you know, you're on somebody's hit list. And you're sitting there like a dingling, just like, what did I do? I'm just sitting here writing. I don't know what, and you're on the hit list. And I cannot say that students treat us any better. But then again, it's systemic. Every professor gets complaints. Every last one. There's no such thing as a professor who's never had a complaint or did not get a complaint. Out of 100 wonderful comments, and I've done this to myself before. I don't typically read the student reviews that they put, the end of the year. And the reason I don't read them is because there'll be 99 positive and 1 negative, and I'll focus on the negative one.
Of course. Exactly.
That's human nature.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I can't do that. I'd rather read a book.
I know that's right.
I have stopped reading them, but I've noticed that at the institutions, once you become a target, and this is not just me, I've heard other professors say this as well, once you become a target, they will know that other professors are receiving complaints, but suddenly your complaints are exacerbated in their minds because they're looking for a way to harm you. That's
right. They're looking for a reason. And that one complaint might be the reason they use. Well, trust me, I know, because I was an adjunct and I was released from 2 different colleges, 2 different scenarios that were very similar. But it's amazing how whenever the complaint comes, your course is not being offered next semester. We've changed the time. It's no longer an evening course. It's a day course now. So yes, I totally get that and understand exactly what you're saying there. So I tell you what, Dr. Alex, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go.
I was saying you just mentioned something really important because I don't think people understand that the adjunct race is very much a POC race. It looks like it's an all-white thing. It's not.
Right.
But how you become an academic full-time is you got to go through the adjunct race at some point, and we are not giving Black faculty enough opportunity to move from adjunct to full-time.
Correct. Like I said, when we talk offline, I'll give you the 2 scenarios, but both of them were, I guess you could anyway, We'll talk at another time. But we are to the point we're down to the last 5 minutes of the interview. And what I do here is I shut the microphone off and I give you the opportunity to promote. So this is your opportunity. You can shout out Ayo again, Dr. Sakai. You can shout out anybody you want, any book signings, any appearances, any events, anything you want to shout. The only thing you can't say during a shout out is a dollar amount. That's the only thing you cannot say. But anything short of that, I'm going to turn the mic off and you have the opportunity to shout out anybody you'd like.
Well, thank you so much. First and foremost, I definitely want to shout out my 2 books that are currently available, my 2 edited books. The first one is Black Witches and Queer Ghosts. That is available through Lexington Publications. And the other book is Black British Women's Writings, 1970s and Beyond, Away from Home. That's available through Cambridge Scholars Publishing. And I just heard that Away from Home is now available in paperback. I definitely want to shout out Dr. Ayo Sakai of Universal Right Publications. Thanks to her, I think more Black writers have an opportunity that we did not have before she started. And with the launching of The Researcher, this absolutely gives us a new way to communicate with our readers, with audiences. So I'm extremely happy about this. I want to thank Marc Medley for having me on the Reading Circle today. It has been an absolute pleasure. And also to any of my students listening, shout out and do your readings this weekend because we're definitely doing some work next week.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end. I've had a pleasure speaking with you as well. Like I said, I record the show and I'll get the links to you. I archive them on my YouTube channel. I will send you the YouTube link and the MP3 link. Once you receive them, you are free to do whatever you'd like to do in terms of sharing them out to the larger audience and to the world. For those who did not rise early with the 2 of us, they have an opportunity to listen to it at a later time. But I thank you so much. And yeah, Dr. Ayo Sakai, we have been close friends. Matter of fact, she was like, when the show first started, I've been on here, this is my 24th year now. The show started in 2001. And Dr. Sakai was one of the first guests that I had on the show back then. As a matter of fact, her name was not Ayo Sakai at that time. She had her.
I remember that name too.
Okay, so then that's how long we've known each other, and we were discussing her novels whenever she came on the show. So yeah, we've known each other for years through the various changes. Prior to her doctorate, and she would always tell me she'd always call me Dr. Medley. I said, no, I ain't doing no doctorate, and ultimately now I am doing one. So she kind of was the prophetess, if you will, but she had already seen it way back then, and so we constantly teach each other about that. But yeah, we've been long, fast friends for a long time, and I am appreciative of her work. And matter of fact, the calendar for the next couple of months are guests that she has recommended. So wow. I am thrilled. It's going to be a lineup of UWP folks, and so I am thrilled with that.
Well, I'm glad you're recording them because that way, as I'm working on other things, I can be sitting and listening. Kind of like how I listened to that interview with the late, great Bell Hooks and Brother Cornell.
Right.
At the New School. I watched that on repeat on YouTube.
Oh, okay. All right. So, yes. So,
I can be listening to your show on repeat as well.
Oh, that'll work. I appreciate it. So, all right. You have a wonderful day. I will be in touch. Thank you so much for rising early because I know you're in Central Time.
Yes, I am.
So it's an hour behind. So the interview started at 7 here, but it was 6 there. So I thank you so much for rising early, and I will be in touch with you.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. All right. Take care now.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.